Okay. Okay. So everyone, good morning, and really give you some context as to what I'm talking about this morning. So a lot of business owners are telling us that it's really important to grow their business. It's a necessity, not just the revenue, but the profits and the cash flow. It's become an essential in their business. And then when we dig a bit deeper into how are they going to achieve that? What does that? What's the plan? What's the strategy to achieve growth in a pretty challenging environment? What's the plan? There isn't really one, and that's what really I'm addressing today. A lot of people are relying on a mixture of hope, maybe that things will get better, which is frankly dangerous, certainly a dangerous strategy, or the fact that we've always done a great job for our clients, Parag, for our customers, so that should be enough. And I think that's pretty naive as well, because there's a lot of businesses who do great jobs for their clients, but are still struggling financially or worse. Or they just defer to working even harder and trying to do more marketing. And so today I'm going to address some of those issues and some of those mistakes, perhaps, and how you can be a lot more strategic about this. So I'm going to introduce you to our system, the system that we use to grow businesses. So it's not a hit and hope for the next few years. It's what's the system, what's the methodology, what's the toolkit, and the system that we've used for every business that we've coached, which I think is, oh goodness, more than 600 businesses now, certainly over the last 19 years that I've been doing this. What is that system? What are some of the key tools within that are helping businesses grow, typically at over 30% per annum? We actually measure this. So every quarter, and I know some of you are doing this with us now, every quarter you come along to a session with us, and part of that session is to measure your results financially. So we make our clients actually input their results from their P&Ls, from the data they have, so that we can see the progress that they're making. So we know what results they're achieving. And it's all based on and around this system. I'm also going to talk about some of the common mistakes around growth and really get you to take some action. These webinars are always designed to be practical education for you. But ultimately, if you don't take away something and actually do something and implement something, you're not going to get any change and any better results. Our vision, I'll remind you about this, because our vision of what we're here to do and what we're here to achieve with businesses is to empower business owners to achieve their dreams. And really that takes two formats, really. Number one, that they can actually achieve a commercial and profitable business. That's something that's consistent, long term, commercially, it's sustainable. And that's really my focus today. Our other part of that vision is to create businesses that are not so reliant on you, the owners, and because of all the issues that creates in many, many ways. That's not the subject of the day, but that is something that I've covered in several webinars over the last 12 months. And you can go and look those up on our YouTube channel. They're all now saved on that channel. I've made sure the team have done that. So they're all there as a reference tool for you and any of your business owner friends to really go back and understand how to achieve that part of the definition. But today I'm really talking about commercial performance and improving commercial performance. And so let's start with your numbers, guys. Let's start with your numbers. And what's the score? And I talk about mistakes. Let's talk about a big mistake that the team and I see with many businesses. And I use a sporting analogy here because, interestingly, if you go back 20, 30 years, in professional sports, there wasn't really much of a scoreboard. You knew who was winning or losing. But what's changed and evolved since then is the implementation of more and more data. So what we see now is that, and in fact, I've seen, oh guys, can we just get everyone on mute, please? Yeah, okay. What I've seen since then is, and I learned this from Sir Clive Woodward, who ran the British the British rugby team when they won the World Cup, and he talked about the importance of data and bringing more data into rugby, and many fact all other professional sports, have followed suit. Let's get us back on screen. Where have we gone? There we go. There we go. Got us back on screen. So many other professional sports have followed suit, where they now have more and more data. Now, the question to ask yourself is why? Why do they do that? Why does a professional tennis player, for example, I'm not a massive tennis player myself, but when you look at tennis, they're not just looking at who's winning or losing. They're looking at, well, what's your backhand winner percentage? How many first serves did you get in? How many double faults did you do? Now, why have they got that data? Why do professional tennis players and all other professional sports players now have more data? And the reason is simple. The data gives clues as to where performance is strong and where performance can be improved. And that's ultimately what they're constantly looking for, is where can my performance get better? And the analogy is absolutely the same in business. And what we see in many businesses is they're running their business like the sports people were playing their sports 30, 40 years ago, based on very basic data. And so they don't have the insights on how they can improve. And so today I'm going to share a few of those numbers, that the basic numbers that really you should have in place, that will give you clues on how you can improve. And I think this is really important, because I'm seeing business owners make really important decisions about pricing strategy and about other important financial decisions in their business without really understanding the current situation and the impact that's going to have. They've got a P&L, maybe, that's up to date, and that's about it. That's about it. And they don't really understand the impact. And they shrug their shoulders and say, well, I don't understand all this stuff. My accountant does my numbers. It's not really my job. And that's delusion. That's a delusion, really. It's your part of your job to understand some of the basic performance data in your business, so that you can really understand strategically how to improve performance. So let me highlight a couple of key numbers that we know any small business should understand. Number one, forecasted cash flow. So not what's your current cash in bank, but what is the forecasted cash flow for the next 6 to 12 months? I.e., how is your bank account going to move up, down? What does that figure look like over the next 6 to 12 months? Of course, it's a forecast. It's an estimate. It's roughly right. You don't know that for sure because it's looking out into the future. But what is that forecast? That forecast will show you whether you're, it will give you some key warnings in advance. Are you forecasting to run out of cash, for example? Or how many more clients do you need, or customers do you need to ensure you sustain cash flow at least a decent level? What are the impact of extra costs in terms of wages or whatever it is that you're planning to do? What impact will that have on your cash flow over the next 6 to 12 months? So it's not based on what you know is coming in. It's based on a forecast, ideally 6 to 12 months out. It's something that whoever your finance support is can help you with if you don't know how to do it yourself. But it is something that's relatively straightforward to do. It doesn't need to be 100% accurate because there's no such thing in a forecast, but it is something you should certainly be looking at in your business, especially when you start building larger overheads like bigger teams. The other one, and I know we've got a lot of construction-focused people on our webinars, construction, architecture, engineering, those kind of professions. Any of you dealing with long-term contract work and projects must know the profitability of your projects and contracts. It's an absolute essential. Not what you forecasted to make when you set the fee, but what are the actuals against that budget as you go through the project. That obviously that's extracted from various pieces of software and your timesheet data, but it's essential that you know whether you're actually making money on projects and which projects are making more, which projects are making less, so that you can start to interrogate that data and understand why. Why are certain projects making more? Why are certain making less? What's the difference? What's leading to those fluctuations in profit? Because when we've done this with many of you, we've seen huge variations in customer and contract profitability, huge. And then we can start interrogating the reasons why and changing it and improving things. And the third one, a basic one, what's the net profit in your business? Do you know that on an ongoing basis? And in fact, my last webinar, I talked about why that was important when you're trying to do things like calculate your forecasted dividend for the year or your forecasted pension contribution, if that's important. There's no point doing that after the year end. It's too late. Then you can't. You're left with whatever you're left with. You should know that these numbers on an ongoing basis. It's so that you know whether they're going up or going down, or whether they're in line with what you need and want or not. And if they're not, you at least you've got a chance to do something about it. So there's just some basics, guys. I know some of you will have this, but it's just some basics to really consider in terms of what impact improving these numbers will have on your business. Now, I'm going to share with you some other numbers that you should also be considering, and they are the numbers that actually go into our business growth system. So this is a system I mentioned, that this is a system we use with everyone we coach. It's called our 5 ways business growth system. And so if you look at a typical business and we look at these 5 variables here that you can influence and improve. And if I put some, I'm just going to put some fictitious numbers here just to illustrate the concept. So imagine you were a business with 100 leads, inquiries per year, and you converted 1 in 4 of those. That would give you 25 clients. And imagine that you were transacting with those, i.e. maybe 1 invoice per year with an average sale value of £8,000. That business, 25 clients, invoice once a year, 8K on average. That's a 200K business. If the margins on that work were 25%, then that business would be left with 50,000 gross profit. So that's just a fictitious examples. Obviously, your numbers will be different. And my first point here is, do you know any of these numbers in your business? Because again, going back to that sporting analogy about the scoreboard, these numbers, at least some of them, should be part of your business scoreboard so that you can start to see which numbers are good, which numbers are not so good, and where can you choose to focus in terms of improvements. So you should have a handle on at least some of these numbers. And for those of you who are on coaching programs and starting those, we will be looking at all of these numbers. What are these in your business and how can you improve them? But do you know what they are? The other thing to say about this system is it's 5. There's 5 ways of improving your business, not just one. And that may sound like a blindingly obvious statement, but let me highlight why that's important. Because when we look at the approach that most businesses take to growth, and they're overlooking some really obvious, not obvious, but overlooked straightforward ways of improving their numbers. Because when we ask most people, what are you going to do today to help grow your business? What action are you going to take? What are you actually going to do? Like, think about that question after this webinar, guys. If you were to do one thing to help you grow your business straight away, what would that be? And what most people tell us it is usually something to do with marketing, lead generation. It's, I'll go and do a social media post, or I'll plan my next networking event, or I'll get an email campaign out, or I'll call up some old inquiries. It's something to do with lead generation. Now, they are all completely valid. Absolutely, you should be doing that. But, and there is a huge but, coming. There is no point turning on what I call the leads tap. There's no point going and doing all that work if the clients and customers that you win are not making you any money. And if you think about this, generating leads is a real challenge for most small businesses. Why? Because your lead generation is constrained by two components. Number one, how much time do you or your team have to do lead generation and marketing? Number two, how much money do you have? You need to throw money or time at it. And unless you're just relying on referrals, which is dangerous in itself. And I talked a lot about these mistakes in my marketing webinar last year. Again, you can refer back to that. But you shouldn't just be relying on referrals. But generating leads consumes time and or money. Most small businesses are constrained by the availability of time and or money. So there is a limit to what most businesses can actually do when it comes to lead generation. It's constrained. So what we actually need to look at is two very overlooked areas. As I said, there's no point going out and doing all that work and putting all that time and energy and money in if you're not making money on the customers that you win. There's little or no margin. Now, some of you, we know, have won projects, clients that actually didn't make you any profit at all. So that all that energy was wasted. And so we need to look at why that's happening and what you can do about it. So that's one overlooked area is the margins that you make on the work that you win. The second overlooked area, again, there's no point going out and doing all this work on lead generation and marketing. Of course, you should be doing it, but it costs time and money. There's no point doing that if your conversion rate is lousy, i.e., how many of those leads, how many of those inquiries do you actually get a yes from? And if that's really low, that should be an area where you should be focusing on your conversion rate rather than just going out and putting all that energy into generating more leads without focusing also on conversion rate. So lead generation, super important, but not at the expense of these two areas. Of course, those other areas of the 5 ways on the screen, number of transactions, average sale value, of course, they're super important as well. And again, depending on your business and your numbers, they may be critical. In fact, one of our clients yesterday, I was talking to, and they produce kind of high end medical dental equipment. So, but the stuff that goes in your mouth, basically, to put it bluntly, the aligners and braces and things like that. And actually, when we look at his numbers, they've got loads of clients. I think he's been growing his clients massively over the last 12 months, and they're up to about 600 live clients. Client acquisition and lead generation is not his issue. Actually, when you look at his numbers, the issue he has in his business is average sale value. So he's got all these clients, but actually, when we look at the data, the average sale value for those clients is really low. And so what we've planned there, our strategy, is to focus on how we can increase that average sale value by 50% or more, which will have a direct impact on revenue without having to generate more clients. It's increasing the average sale value with his existing clients. So we can only look at that strategy because we had his data and we can see where the weakness is in his business. Obviously, it depends on your business. And if you've got some of this data, you can start to see where you're falling down. Is it lead generation? Is it conversion rate? Is it your client margins? Or is it actually your average sale value or one of the other factors here? You can start to be much more strategic about where you focus rather than just blindly putting more time. Which one of you's got more time to do more marketing? The only time you'll have that tends to be when you've run out of clients. But that may be a foolhardy if there's actually easier and quicker wins on some of these other areas. So Let's just look at margins for a moment because we see some very common mistakes here. Number one, let's talk about the big one, of course, your pricing, your fee levels. And I put this screenshot up on the screen here. This is from a video I actually recorded. And interestingly, I recorded this video. I think it was in 2014 or 2015. So it's over a decade old. And I recorded it because I was hearing so many people talk about the issues of fee pressure, and they're having to lower prices to win work, and it's really tough out there, Parag. So I recorded this video about what to do about it. And interesting now, we're seeing that still being the issue for so many businesses. They feel like they have to reduce their prices in order to win work. And that is the fastest way to kill your practice and kill your business, because you're going to erode your margins until there's nothing left. So this issue just seems to be ever present for businesses. And you cannot afford to play that game. I know I've said this so many times, and I will keep saying it. You cannot afford to play that game, no matter how tempting, no matter how many competitors undercut you. You can't do it. It's a slippery slope to the bottom. So, what can you do about this? Because going back to my margins point, if you could actually find a way of increasing your price point, that would have a direct impact in terms of your margins per client, your margins per customer, and therefore your overall margins for your business. So if you can find a way to address this, it's a great thing. Now, firstly then, let's talk about cows. Why am I talking about cows? So I use this analogy from a famous book by Seth Godin called Purple Cow. And basically the summary of that book is that you see a field of cows. There's nothing special. You don't notice anything because they're just cows. You see a purple cow. That's special. That's different. That gets noticed. And this whole issue of differentiating yourself from the crowd, differentiating yourself from the herd is so, so critical. And I've actually tested this on many businesses. I remember, goodness, back in 2010, I was coaching a web design company. And again, great at what they did and all this good stuff, great customers who loved what they did. But they weren't necessarily growing in the way they'd like to. And I looked at what they were saying on their website, and I went on Google and I looked at all the other companies in their industry on the first page of Google. And the interesting thing was 9 out of 10 of those competitors literally were using the same words to describe who they were and what they did. It was like they copied and pasted it. They all look like the same cow. And if you think about put yourself in the shoes of your customer, of your client, and if if you look like and feel like and sound like your competitors, how are they going to make a decision about whether they choose you or someone else? The decision inevitably comes back to price because there's no other differentiator. So you need to look at how are you differentiating in yourself in your marketplace with your target audience through your marketing. You've got to look different. And in fact, I would go so far as to say differentiate or die. One of the biggest reasons businesses flatline and go under is because they're undifferentiated. They may be great at what they do, but to the outside person, they look the same. Now, what else could you do? I've talked about niching, of course, in the past. So there's taking this further and really, really honing down the product or service you offer and not being so broad and generic with who you're offering it to. And niching down is a strategy that can make you stand out, look different, but also more directly appeal to your target audience, rather than trying to appeal to everyone. When you appeal to everyone, it's very hard to communicate in their language, so you end up appealing to no one. And the great power of niching down that service, that offering, is that ultimately you can start to move away from price competition. And again, I've talked about this in the previous webinar about your margins and how you can increase margins. I did a whole session on profitability and margins. I talked about this and the examples of this, that there's many businesses who've niched down and therefore moved away from having to compete on price because of that niche. And in fact, they've been able to increase prices. Apple is the obvious example, of course, but there's so many small business examples. So ultimately, the better you can do this, the more chance you have of not being seen as a fish in the big pond and the same pond as everyone else. And it ultimately comes down to this decision in your buyer's mind. Do they see you as the price, the cost to them, or do they see the value? Which one is winning? And the value proposition is critical to you being able to win this battle in their mind. Because when they see the value is not what you do or who you are. That's not value. The value is what is the ultimate value that you bring to your target audience. What is the value of doing business with you? Not what you do. And if that's not communicated through your sales process, through your marketing, if that's not coming out, then it's going to come back to price. It's going to come back to price every time. And it's, I see that. I'll give another example. I've coached a lot of gyms historically. And unfortunately, like many industries, gyms get this badly wrong. Of course, it's January at the moment. They're pretty full, but the gyms spend a lot of time marketing and trying to get new leads. And what I notice about gyms and fitness clubs is that the number one thing they market is price a lot of the time, discounts, offers. But there's two problems with gyms. Number one, they're not very good at retaining clients and customers. So they're constantly having to market because they typically churn about 50% of their members per annum. So they're constantly having to work just to stand still. And secondly, they're not talking about the value in their marketing. They're not talking about the value to the joiner of joining the gym. They're not talking about the value that particular business brings. So it all just goes back to price. And so ultimately, people are buying based on price. They're not even staying. It's a flawed business model. The other thing I'd say is when you get this right, this is just an extract from one of our clients, Arkeo, and they started coaching with us in 2016. They're still clients today, 9 years later. And I remember in that first year, and they were just a small business at that time, a small practice of 4 or 5 people. And I remember we looked at their pricing strategy because they were making the same mistakes as many others in terms of having to lower fees. But that's challenging. We know that's challenging for a lot of businesses when you're in highly competitive sectors, which is let's be honest, is pretty much all of us. When you're in highly competitive sectors, it is challenging to increase fees when everyone else is lowering. It's challenging. And so the other thing we looked at actually was their efficiencies. Because when you look at most service businesses in particular, your biggest overhead is wages. So we looked at their pricing strategy. We also looked at the efficiency from their wages. What were the productivity levels? How could that be measured and communicated so that we could create greater productivity from every single person in that team? And especially when you've got a small team, the productivity per person is so critical. And I'll be honest, with most service businesses, we see huge inefficiency. Not because people are lazy, not at all. Not because people are lazy, because there's no definition of productivity. There's no definition of what good looks like. There's no definition of what the output is that you want from people. It's vague or not monitored. And when you start to tighten this up, we see huge improvements in margins for the businesses where this has really not been measured historically or not been a focal point. So for many of you, there's scope with fees and prices, absolutely. But for many of you, there may even be bigger scope with efficiency of wage. Now, the other thing, sorry, there's a little bit of margins there. The other thing I want to mention is your sales skills. And I talked about conversion rate and the impact you can have on conversion rate. Now, so let's talk about content. Because I have been sharing this quote from Seth Godin since 2013. And I keep sharing it. And I will keep sharing it until the message hits home. Because you look at how people are making buying decisions, especially for higher value services like many of yours. And they are making those decisions slowly, first of all. And I think we're seeing that sales process take even longer now. And they're making it based on who they trust and who they feel is credible. And content plays a huge role in building trust with your audience. It's hard work. I know that, guys. We know that in our own business. I know that these webinars that I run, that's part of our content strategy. It's hard work, and I've been doing this for 19 years. But I have to plan and prepare these sessions when I'm busy, and it's hard work, and it's easy to put off. It's easy to find an excuse not to do it. But you have to understand the value of content and the way people are making decisions about your service. They're making it based on trust. What is a sale? What is a sales process? It's ultimately your ability to build enough trust for them to say yes. And content marketing, whatever format you use, and whether it's videos or webinars or podcasts or LinkedIn stuff, and whatever the format is, it is the evolution. I mean, Seth Godin was 10 years ahead of the curve here when he made this quote, because he's right. This is the way marketing is done now. And we see far too many businesses just come up with every reason not to do this. And you are going to be left behind. In fact, many of you are being left behind because you're not visible and not building the trust that content can achieve. And so I will keep saying this, guys, because it's a consistent issue for the last decade. And I do worry for those businesses that don't understand this. And in fact, to give you a positive example of this, I do these webinars every month, as you know, and we have all our content saved on our YouTube channel. And in fact, one of our newest clients, Chris, I think he's on this webinar, and Chris sent me an email just before the end of last year saying, "Hey, Parag, I've been coming to all your webinars. I love it. I've been shopping around. I've been doing my due diligence. I've been looking at the content. I'm in." And I was like, wow, what a great message to get based on the content, that somebody realized the value and understood the value and trusted the value of what we do. And I know, even after all these years in my own business, it's really hard to build trust in your audience. If you're just relying on one or two meetings and you're expecting them to pay a premium for your service, but there's no other education going out to your audience on why you and why you're trustworthy and credible. So I will wholeheartedly advocate this approach. The other thing I'd say about conversion rates, and I used this in my sales webinar last year. I shared this concept that sales is challenging. It's something that a lot of people fear, even if they don't admit it publicly. It is A lot of people feel this way. And the number one way to overcome, I suppose, some of the fears, the limiting beliefs around sales, and is it a good thing for you or a bad thing? Let me say this bluntly: sales is essential. Without good sales skills, you will not survive. Without good sales skills, you will not survive. That's how essential it is. So, whether you fear it or not, whether you find it uncomfortable or not, you need to embrace that challenge. How do you do that? You can learn. Sales skills are absolutely learnable. There is reams and reams of information out there on the internet. You can consume it in whatever format you choose. It's most of it is free, and most of it, especially from credible people and world-class entrepreneurs, most of it is really, really good. You just have to invest a bit of time. It's not even money. It's just time to help you overcome the misunderstandings. Because I always use this analogy. It's like going into battle. Sales is like going into battle, and you don't have the skills, you don't have the knowledge, and it's like going into battle with a teaspoon. You don't have the weapons at your disposal to deal with the challenges. So you're going to lose. So those skills can be learned. And again, as I said when I showed you the 5 ways, there's no point going out there and trying to generate more and more leads, which is hard work, takes time and money, if you don't have the basic skills to help with your conversion. The other thing I'd say, and again, this is an extract from my marketing webinar, the other thing that can really help you with conversion is an understanding of social proof. And this is a term from psychology, social proof, that as human beings, we tend to follow the crowd. We will make a lot of our decisions based on what other people have done before you. And so if you understand that concept, you want to think about, where is the social proof out there for my business? What's out there to show that we are a safe pair of hands, we are trustworthy, we are credible, and other people agree? Other people have said so. And of course, what am I talking about? I'm talking about reviews. I'm talking about case studies, testimonials, reviews. It's an absolute given that you should be gathering reviews for your business. And whether it's Google reviews or industry specific reviews for your business. This is just an example of the reviews for our business. We're at over 100 Google reviews now, which I'm super proud of. We need that social proof. Every business needs that social proof out there, so that when people are doing their remember, they're doing their due diligence, they're shopping around, they're looking, they're investigating online. When they're doing that, what are they seeing about your reviews, your case studies, your testimonials? What are they actually seeing? Are they seeing anything? Are they seeing you with a testimonial from 8 years ago and 3 puny little Google reviews compared to somebody else who's got 10 times that? The social proof in their mind is going, well, surely I trust the one that's got more and that just looks more credible. Even if they may not be a better business and a better service, the trust is going to go to the people who are generally winning with this stuff. So yeah, if you don't have the money and time for more marketing, this does not require money and time. It just requires a bit of focus. Because if I go back to the 5 ways here, and I go back to those numbers I shared with you, our goal with everyone we coach is to add 10% to those 5 ways numbers. And so if we add 10% to each one of those variables, now of course it depends, and some of you were like, well, Parag, I want a better improvement on my conversion rate, or I want a better improvement on repeat business. Yeah, absolutely. There'll be bigger wins on certain numbers. But if we just take an overall framework of 10%, and if we apply 10% to each one of the 5 ways numbers, you'll notice something very interesting. You'll notice how much the turnover, the revenue, has gone up by. And the revenue has not gone up by 10%. It's gone in this business from 200 to 200, almost 293K, which is an improvement of 46%. If we do the same on margins as well, the margin, just a 10% incremental improvement. So the margin per client, per customer, 25 to 27.5%. We extrapolate that through, the profits over 80K. Profits are up by 61%. Now, how on earth is that possible? We've only increased each area by 10%. It's pretty modest, pretty conservative. And yet, we've got those improvements on revenue and profit. And the simple answer is something called compounding. In other words, we've made small improvements across multiple areas. And those small improvements across multiple areas compound up. So it's no good just working on one area like your lead generation. This is about working on multiple areas over the course of years and seeing the compound impact that has. Now, that requires a serious level of discipline and diligence and consistency to ensure you see these improvements through. And that's part of the reason we exist, is to make sure that our clients have these numbers so they can see what they're focusing on, they can see the impact, they can see what's maybe being neglected, so they're accountable for that. We give them that focus. But ultimately, this is a concept that actually was made famous by the coach of the GB cycling team, Dave Brailsford. And you may have heard of this guy's marginal gains. And he said, when he was asked, how did the British cycling team go from a team that had won nothing to a team that seemed to win everything, he talked about this concept of marginal gains, small incremental improvements across multiple areas, executed consistently over time, gave them this massive improvement. So, just to finish up, guys, as ever, I've thrown a lot at you this morning. These sessions are about practical information, but without the implementation, and I suppose the accountability to do that, it's not going to make any difference. So what are you going to do from today? What action will you take? You decide. We'd love to hear that, of course, but that's always a focus for you to understand what are you actually going to do next.